The icy silence of the mountains, which promised peace for the winter holidays, was shattered by chilling whispers. Legends of a creature roaming the snow, the fearsome ice Yeti, materialized in strange phenomena that paralyzed ski lifts and slopes. Was it just the small town's imagination, or did a much colder and more terrifying mystery await the Mystery Incorporated gang in the vast white expanse of the forest? Fred yearned for an icy challenge, Daphne worried about the tourists' safety, and Velma sought a scientific explanation for the chaos. Scooby and Shaggy, well, they just hoped the hot chocolate supply would survive the adventure. The Mystery Machine glided along the winding, snow-covered roads, with the Mystery Incorporated gang on board, heading for Alpine Ridge Resort, a luxury retreat nestled in the majestic mountains. The landscape was a spectacle in itself, pine trees covered in a thick layer of sparkling snow under the winter sun. Fred's excitement for the chance to ski and the promise of hot chocolate and snacks for Scooby and Shaggy were palpable. Daphne was charmed by the beauty of the place, while Velma already observed the surroundings with her scientific curiosity. However, the idyllic atmosphere was quickly overshadowed by a wave of apprehension. The first warnings about the Ice Yeti were treated as local folklore, a fun legend to entertain tourists. This perception drastically changed when the main ski lift, without any warning, froze in mid-air, leaving dozens of tourists trapped in their chairs, suspended meters above the ground, trembling with cold and fear. Fred, with his knack for traps, already envisioned ways to adapt his gadgets to the icy environment, thinking of an improvised rescue plan. Daphne, with her innate concern, dedicated herself to calming the terrified guests' nerves, handing out blankets and words of comfort. Velma, on the other hand, was already immersed in data collection, analyzing air and ice temperatures, trying to find a scientific explanation for the phenomenon. She noticed something peculiar: the freezing was selective, affecting only the ski lift and a few specific areas, while other parts of the resort with similar temperatures remained untouched. The absence of frost in places where it would be expected intrigued her. Scooby and Shaggy, in their own world, were more concerned with finding the nearest snack shack. To their dismay, the shack itself was partially frozen, with its hot chocolate solidified and snacks hardened by the mysterious cold. The villagers, previously skeptical, began reporting sightings of a large, furry figure near the forest. The resort manager, an unyielding businessman named Mr. Worthington, tried at all costs to suppress the rumors, attributing them to a collective hysteria to protect his establishment's image. However, the panic intensified when more ski equipment was found frozen and unusable, and some slopes were blocked by ice. Velma concluded that the freezing patterns were bizarre and inexplicable by common natural phenomena. During a risky night patrol, Fred and Daphne came across enormous, deep footprints in the fresh snow, which definitely did not belong to any known animal in the region. The silence of the forest was then brutally broken by a distant and terrifying howl, a primal sound that echoed through the mountains, sending shivers down Daphne's spine and confirming that something was indeed lurking in the vast whiteness. The howl, icy and enigmatic, still resonated in the gang's minds as they huddled together, their gazes fixed on the gigantic footprints in the snow. Fred, with his hunter's mentality, immediately set out to track them, his adventure compass pointing towards the unknown. Velma, crouching, analyzed the depth and shape of the marks, trying to determine the creature's weight and structure. "They're too deep for a polar bear, and the drag suggests an unusual bipedal posture," she murmured, her brow furrowed. The footprints led to an even more remote and dense part of the forest, known by locals as the Frozen Labyrinth, filled with caves and jagged rock formations, where sunlight barely reached the snowy ground. The danger of the legendary creature was beginning to become a palpable reality, and the air grew increasingly thick with mystery and apprehension. Daphne, with her unwavering concern for others' safety, couldn't just focus on the creature. She organized a volunteer patrol system among the bravest guests at the resort, despite the reluctance and anger of Mr. Worthington, who saw the initiative as an acknowledgement of the problem. "You're spreading panic, Miss Blake," he fumed, but Daphne stood firm. Meanwhile, Scooby and Shaggy, always putting their stomachs first, tried to use the mystery as an excuse to get more snacks, claiming they needed extra energy to help with the investigation. On one of their supply missions, they ventured farther than they should have and briefly got lost in the snow. The silence of the forest was broken only by the sound of the wind and their own chattering teeth, further increasing their fear of what might be lurking in the white shadows. During their deeper exploration of the forest, the gang stumbled upon an old abandoned cabin, almost completely covered by a thick layer of snow and ice, looking like a natural landform. The door was ajar, creaking in the wind, and inside, the air was biting. To their surprise, the interior was not empty. They found strange scientific equipment, frozen test tubes, complex meters, and ancient maps with enigmatic markings that seemed to indicate temperature patterns and secret routes through the mountain. Velma, with a gleam in her eyes, found a forgotten journal on a dusty table. Its pages were almost illegible due to moisture and time, but a few fragmented words could be distinguished, such as, experiments with extreme temperatures, and a search for a cold energy source. Fred, excited by the possibility of a perfect trap, began sketching plans to capture the Ice Yeti using the information found in the journal and the cabin's own structure. The cabin's location was strategic, offering a privileged view of the ski lift and slopes, which Velma noted with concern. Was it just a coincidence? As the team discussed their next steps, a loud and sudden noise coming from outside the cabin alerted them to an unexpected presence. The icy air seemed to grow even colder, and the tension was almost palpable, making them question if they were alone in that frozen hideaway. The noise that startled the gang turned out to be just one of the volunteer tourists Daphne had recruited, a young adventurer trying to retrieve some skis lost in the blizzard. Despite the relief, the experience reinforced the feeling that they were not alone in the vast, icy wilderness of the forest. Velma, tirelessly, continued to battle against time and moisture to decipher the pages of the mysterious journal. The few words she could make out spoke of an energy crystallization and the audacious attempt to control the cold, a concept that sent shivers down Fred's spine with its destructive potential. Fred, his mind already buzzing with ideas, began setting up his trap, using the abandoned cabin as an ideal strategic point. He adapted some of the gadgets found in the makeshift laboratory, transforming them into components for an intricate capture plan. His goal was not only to stop the creature but also to discover its true nature. Meanwhile, Daphne continued to interact with the local residents, who desperately sought her out. They shared increasingly terrifying stories about the Yeti, tales of people who ventured into the forest seeking adventure and were never seen again, making her even more apprehensive and determined to find a quick solution. A strong and unexpected blizzard hit the resort, isolating it completely from the outside world. Visibility dropped to almost zero, and the wind howled like a frozen ghost. Fear, previously an undercurrent, now openly bubbled among the tourists. The freezing phenomena intensified alarmingly, even affecting food in the restaurants, dishes that chilled in seconds, turning into blocks of ice before they could be savored, and the resort's tap water, which simply stopped flowing, solidified in the pipes. Scooby and Shaggy, desperate for anything warm and edible, decided to risk a trip to the main kitchen, where they found entire dishes frozen, despite the ambient heating. The sight of a chocolate cake turning into a giant popsicle left them in shock. Velma, observing the freezing patterns, noticed that they were increasingly irregular and unpredictable, suggesting that the creature, or whatever was causing it, was becoming more audacious or, dangerously, out of control. Chaos was setting in. As the blizzard worsened, a security alarm at the resort blared loudly, indicating an invasion in one of the complex's restricted areas, an area that even guests were not allowed to access. The team's hearts quickened, knowing that the truth was getting closer. The shrill sound of the security alarm echoed through the resort's corridors, cutting through the icy silence of the blizzard. The Mystery Incorporated gang rushed towards the service area, an intricate labyrinth of narrow corridors, exposed pipes, and heavy machinery that connected all of the resort's facilities. Upon entering, they were met by a shocking sight. An entire corridor was completely frozen, its walls, ceiling, and floor covered in a thick, shimmering layer of ice. Even control panels and tools hanging on the walls were encased in a freezing crust. Velma, with her flashlight, inspected the frozen equipment. It's advanced cooling technology, she observed, but something has drastically altered it. It seems to be the source of some of the localized freezing. The team quickly deduced that someone was manipulating the resort's refrigeration system. As Fred analyzed the pipes, they discovered a secret compartment hidden behind a maintenance panel. Inside, a series of wide, dark ventilation ducts led directly out of the resort, towards the forest. Fred deduced that the Yeti could be using these ducts to move unseen, a system of icy tunnels beneath the snow. While exploring the ducts, Scooby and Shaggy, always looking for a shortcut or a snack, separated from the group, drawn by a faint smell of food coming from some part of the system. They ended up in a resort food pantry, a normally heated area, but which now resembled a cold storage room. There, to their terror, they encountered a hooded man who appeared to be manipulating a glowing electronic device. The man, startled by the sudden appearance of the two friends, let out a muffled cry and quickly fled through an emergency exit, dropping a small, shining object on the floor. It was a quartz crystal, which emitted a cold, pale, almost ghostly glow. At the same time, Velma, who continued to decipher the journal in another part of the corridor, managed to read a few more pages, now more legible due to the drier air in that location. The notes described the creation of a cold amplifier, an experimental device capable of controlling temperatures on an unprecedented scale, and the dangers of using it excessively. The notes also mentioned a prototype being tested near the abandoned cabin. The tension increased when they realized that the corridor they were in was rapidly freezing beneath their feet, sealing the exit. They were trapped, and the ice was advancing. The corridor froze almost instantly behind them, but the gang narrowly escaped, using one of the shortcuts Fred had mentally mapped, knowledge gained from his many adventures in tight spots. They were now certain that there was a mind behind the freezing phenomena, a mind that was not that of a mythical creature, but rather that of someone with a very human and dangerous plan. The glowing crystal found by Scooby and Shaggy in the pantry deeply intrigued Velma. She examined it with a magnifying glass, noticing that it emitted a subtle, icy energy. This crystal must be a key piece for the cold amplifier described in the journal, she murmured, her logical mind working at top speed. Fred, with the journal's information in mind and his own observations of the freezing patterns, began to deduce the possible location of the Yeti's hideout. If the journal spoke of tests and prototypes, the hideout had to be an isolated and vast location. The answer came to him, an old abandoned mine in the mountains, known for its deep, isolated galleries, where the air was naturally cold and echoes resonated, amplifying any sound. It was the perfect place for a secret experiment. The team prepared for the final assault, gathering their equipment and formulating a plan, but they knew that danger was imminent and that this would be the decisive confrontation. As they approached the mine, the temperature dropped drastically, and a thick, icy fog made visibility almost nil. The sound of howling winds and cracking ice, like breaking bones, echoed through the dark, damp mine galleries, increasing the sense of dread. Inside the mine, they found a makeshift laboratory, illuminated by faint, pulsing lights. The place was filled with complex refrigeration equipment, bubbling tubes, and noisy generators, which seemed to pump out an almost palpable cold. Then, he appeared. The Ice Yeti, an imposing figure, covered in a dense white fur coat and glowing eyes, emerged from the shadows. But, to everyone's surprise, he was not a mythical creature. The elaborate costume was being controlled by a man, who was manipulating a device similar to the crystal found by Scooby and Shaggy, only much larger and more complex. It was Mr. Worthington, the resort manager. With a look of madness in his eyes, he confessed that he was trying to create a unique tourist attraction for his resort, an ambitious ice kingdom, which would put him on the world tourism map. He had found the plans of the reclusive scientist, the journal's author, and built the cold amplifier, but he admitted, with a twisted smile, that the device had gotten out of control. Fred, Daphne, Velma, Scooby, and Shaggy had to think fast to stop the manager before he froze the entire resort. The final confrontation in the abandoned mine was intense and chilling. Mr. Worthington, his mind distorted by his obsession with creating the Ice Kingdom, fired blasts of icy air from the amplifier, transforming the mine galleries into a labyrinth of ice and fog. The gang dodged desperately, the air freezing in their lungs with every breath. Fred, with his agility and knowledge of traps, used the rock formations and some of the discarded equipment in the mine to create an improvised trap, adapted for the extreme cold. He managed to temporarily trap the manager, entangling him in cables and boxes while he was distracted by Scooby and Shaggy. Daphne, with her incredible agility and sense of opportunity, seized the distraction. She snaked through the frozen galleries, dodging the blasts of cold air, in a desperate race to reach the main control panel of the amplifier. Her fingers were numb, but she persisted. Meanwhile, Velma, with her brilliant mind, noticed a crucial detail in the scientist's journal: the amplifier was overloaded, operating far beyond its safe limits. "It's going to explode," she cried, her voice echoing in the mine. "And if it does, it will freeze everything for miles around irreversibly." In that critical moment, Scooby and Shaggy, in an act of pure heroism driven by their rumbling stomachs, had an idea. Distracting the manager, who struggled to free himself from Fred's trap, they threw him a series of frozen snacks they had saved. Mr. Worthington, despite his madness, was a self-proclaimed glutton, and the sight of the food, even frozen, paralyzed him for an instant, allowing Daphne, with one last effort, to reach the panel and deactivate the amplifier. The explosion was averted by a hair's breadth. The sound of howling winds and cracking ice subsided until it ceased completely. The source of the intense cold was deactivated, and the temperature in the mine, though still cold, began to gradually normalize. Mr. Worthington, unmasked and with his plan foiled, was apprehended by the authorities the gang had contacted beforehand. The blizzard, which seemed endless, began to subside, and the sun shone again over the resort, promising a slow and gradual thaw. The Mystery Incorporated gang was hailed as heroes, saving everyone's winter vacation and the resort's reputation. Life began to return to normal, and tourists could finally enjoy the snow without the constant fear of an ice yeti. The Ice Yeti reverted to being just a legend, though now with a curious story behind it, that of an ambitious manager and his out-of-control cold machine. The gang bid farewell to the resort, their hearts warmed by friendship and the satisfaction of another mystery solved. They knew that, once again, they had proven that not everything that seems supernatural truly is, and that the truth, no matter how cold, can always be unfrozen. The snow, which once haunted with its mysterious cold and the threat of a monster, now sparkled under the renewed sun, revealing the simple beauty of the unfrozen forest. The Ice Yeti, unmasked as a greedy scheme, became merely a curious memory, a story to be told by the fireplace, with a touch of humor about a very ambitious manager. Peace and warmth returned to the resort, restoring the joy of the winter holidays. The mystery machine departed, carrying with it the team that once again proved that unwavering curiosity, unbreakable friendship, and a little courage can melt any enigma, transforming fear into a valuable lesson and a warm, comforting ending for all.